Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 314 of the All Dolphins podcast, where today we're going to be discussing the front seven as our training camp outlooks continue. We have discussed already the secondary. We have discussed the quarterback position. We have discussed the offensive line. So today we'll do the front seven, which will include the interior defensive linemen, the edge defenders, and the off-the-ball linebackers. How's that for very, very specific position terminology? I am joined again today by my good buddy and regular guest, Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. How are you, Chris Perkins?
I am ready to talk some D-line, Poop. How's that, man? I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Before we do, however, we will do our obligatory history lesson today, focusing on 2014, episode 314, which was a rather nondescript year. The Dolphins, with the draft, had the 90th overall pick, selected tackle Juwan James from the University of Tennessee, a pick which at the time left me in a very meh mode, because my philosophy, you're gonna draft a right tackle in the first round. Obviously, if you have a left-handed quarterback, as the Dolphins do now, it's a different story. But generally speaking, you're gonna draft a right tackle in the first round. That dude better be a difference maker, a la Alain Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, who was the 4th overall pick in 2013. Juwan James was a solid NFL player for the Dolphins, but not a difference maker. But I will say that I went back and looked at that 2019 first round, and it's not like the Dolphins missed out on anybody special after Juwan James. So there's that. As far as the season is concerned, this was a year where the Dolphins found themselves in the position to make some hay. I have to double check to make sure I have my years correct. They were 7-5 at some point, wound up losing their next 2 games. That knocked them out of playoff contention. Then they beat the Minnesota Vikings in what was a fabulously entertaining game, a wild, crazy fourth quarter. Dolphins win 37-35 when Terrence Fede blocked a punt through the end zone for a safety in the final minute. In the locker room after the game, as the reporters are standing around waiting for players to become available to talk, to give their post-game reaction, owner Stephen Ross wanders in and tells the media, "I have an early Christmas present for you guys. There will not be a coaching search because Joe Philbin will be back for 2015. And I think the reaction of all of us, mostly like the big guys for daily newspapers, I think you were happy that you didn't have to deal with that. For me, working with Dolphin Digest at the time, where the daily nuts and bolts weren't as much of an emphasis, my only reaction was like, why are we bringing back Joe Philbin? And lo and behold, he was brought back, and 4 years into the following season, he was gone. So were you happy when Stephen Ross made that announcement? You didn't have to deal with a coaching search?
As a media member, yes. If I was a Dolphins fan, I'd have been like, Steve, let's go to this side room here and get you an X-ray and let's talk about what you just did. We all like Joe Philbin, right? Yeah. But that was not a good decision.
Yeah, and the last thing we'll say about the 2014 season is that Brian Hartline, we should point out, who's now a very, very highly regarded offensive coach at Ohio State, had a second consecutive. No, I take that back. He did not. He had consecutive 1,000-yard seasons in 2012 and 2013. So my bad. Bad Alain. Mike Wallace was on the team as one of the wide receivers. And if I remember correctly, that was the year that ended with Mike Wallace doing a press conference with him just standing in front of us and Brandon Gibson basically answering everything for Mike Wallace.
Right.
Which is certainly very interesting, because Mike Wallace had a tendency to be, shall we say, moody and in his feelings if he wasn't involved enough.
You never see that from receivers, do you?
I know. For sure. Low maintenance. Okay, so we're not going to talk about receivers today. We're going to talk about receivers in an upcoming episode. Today we're going to talk about the front seven, which has a lot of major storylines, and the 2 big ones is, can the Dolphins adequately make up for the loss of production with Christian Wilkins now gone in Las Vegas? And the other major story is, what can the Dolphins realistically expect from Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips this year as they return from their injuries? And do they have enough alongside them to make up for the lost production there?
A lot of storylines here, Poop. Can Zach Sealer be the guy that they want him to be, considering Christian Wilkins is gone? As you pointed out wisely a few times, if you compare numbers, Zach Sealer is kind of in that same ballpark as Christian Wilkins. Well, he is in the same ballpark as Christian Wilkins. So you've got that. What can Anthony Weaver, the new defensive coordinator, do with Zach Sealer, moving him around? Can he keep the double teams and things like that off of Zach Sealer? He's going to be a focal point. You mentioned Jalen Phillips coming back from the Achilles, Bradley Chubb coming back from the knee. You've got Calais Campbell at 37 years old. He can play inside and outside. I believe 105.5 career sacks, NFL All-Decade in the 2020s or 2010s. I'm sorry, 2010s, I think. Yeah, so you've got that. You've got Chop Robinson, the first-round pick. You've got Shaq Barrett. Where I'm talking ways to rush the passer here. I'm sorry. So you would have Chop Robinson, Calais Campbell, Shaq Barrett, the fifth-round pick Mo Camara. But you've also lost Andrew Van Ginkel. How are you going to get pressure on the quarterback early in the season? And then when Chubb and Phillips come back, how long is it going to take them to get to 100%? So a lot of questions on the defensive line, interior, and on the edges.
Yeah, and I think we know a lot more about the Dolphins' situation on the offense than we do on defense. There are a lot more question marks on defense, and it starts with having a new defensive coordinator. And then here's the thing. This is why it's very difficult to predict how good this Dolphin defense is going to be, because it could go from best case scenario, Chop Robinson translates his ridiculous physical traits, the athleticism and then the get off and then all that, into sack numbers and pressure numbers, which he didn't do at Penn State. Shaquille Barrett goes back to being Shaquille Barrett from a couple of years ago. And then Chubb and Phillips don't miss too much time, and they don't take very long to go back to what they were last year. And then boom, voila, you have a really good pass rush and a very good front seven. And then the worst case scenario is Chop Robinson's continues to be like a guy who, again, whose physical attributes scream pass rushing terror, but it's just not there. Shaquille Barrett continues to kind of slow down because, again, he's not on the younger side. It takes a while for Chubb and Phillips to get back to what they were, and then all of a sudden the pass rush is a problem. So there's a lot of ways this could go, and to sit here and say, well, we're very confident this is what's going to happen. I mean, we don't know. We hope, but we don't know.
Right. And look, Poop, I think I've mentioned this, and we've talked about this on a previous episode, the Anthony Weaver thing, him coming in from Baltimore, where they were very multiple. They had diverse blitz packages. We saw stuff in OTAs and minicamp that we hadn't seen before. I'm just saying. As far as combinations and things like that, and it was like, oh, wow. Oh, this is going to be exciting. And so, the fans are going to see this soon enough in training camp. But I'm excited by what Anthony Weaver can do with this D-line. As you say, the personnel we'll see, and we'll go through the names of a lot of the D tackles that they've acquired in the off season. But, you've got Zach Sealer and we'll see what Anthony Weaver can do with Calais Campbell and Shaq Barrett and Chop Robinson and Mo Camara in the time that it takes the other defensive tackles to develop and the time that it takes Chubb and Phillips to fully recover and get back to 100%. A lot can happen in between then. And obviously, if you're successful at what you do, you don't have to produce a Pro Bowl player. You just have to have these guys execute your scheme effectively. If that happens, Poop, and then you get Chubb and Phillips back at, let's just say 80%, you can be an effective defensive front by the time December rolls around and you're making your playoff push.
No, I agree. And it doesn't have to be necessarily individual players who put up those huge sack numbers. And last year, what the Dolphins had, they had three guys who had either double digits or close to it, with Sealer, Wilkins, and Jalen Phillips, and Bradley Chubb also, actually. So they had four guys, which is really, really impressive. And this is, again, for a defense that was criticized for being bend and break, well, maybe, or not terribly aggressive up front. Well, maybe the Dolphins didn't have to be because they still got a lot of sacks. With Anthony Weaver coming in, with the situation involving Chubb and Phillips, and this, again, the unknown factor with Robinson and Barrett, it just may be that more from a blitzing perspective is needed, and this is where Anthony Weaver could come in and certainly would do that. Jordan Brooks, one of the newcomers at off the ball linebacker, has very good blitzing ability, was very effective as a pass rusher last year. He looks to me like an upgrade over Jerome Baker. This is a former first round pick, mind you. So there's obviously a lot of skill. The flip side to that is the performance was a bit uneven with Seattle during his time there. Otherwise, they would have exercised a fifth-year option on him for 2024, which they didn't. And then they wound up, allowing him to leave as a free agent this particular offseason. And then if we're talking about off-the-ball linebackers, Anthony Walker Jr. to me also is a really, really impressive addition. That dude look good. And then it's the spring, and I hate to even mention the spring because it's really not very relevant. But if a guy can really wow the media, a veteran newcomer can wow the media during spring practices, that dude did it.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be okay at that linebacker spot. Look, I hate to lose Jerome Baker, class act, classy guy on the field and off the field, but he's not a Pro Bowl type player. Now you don't necessarily have to have a Pro Bowl type player there, but kind of my point is you can replace what was lost there. It's not like you're talking about replacing Xavier Howard of 3 or 4 years ago. That's not like what we're talking about. We're talking about replacing a solid player with a solid player. I think the Dolphins have done that.
No, I agree. And we kind of been focusing on the pass rush here. The question again will be about defending the run. Christian was really, really good defending the run in his first 3 years. He was good last year. I think last year he maybe was better as a pass rusher. And could it be that maybe his mindset was more, let me attack the quarterback as opposed to protect against the run because that's how I'm going to get paid? Don't want to speak for the dude, but whatever it was, it certainly worked with the amount of money he got from the Raiders. And by the way, I think you're on the same page as I am that there's no way the Dolphins can be faulted for not matching what Vegas offered Wilkins, if they were even offered the chance to match. And as far as not signing Wilkins last year to an extension, making him play on the fifth-year option, which of course is a topic now because of the situation involving their quarterback. As I always maintain, again, it takes two to tango. Did the Dolphins make a decent contract offer and it was Christian who bet on himself and thought he could get more? And if that's the case, are we going to fault the Dolphins for not coming up to the level that would have secured Wilkins' services?
No, I think the Dolphins handled the Christian Wilkins and Rob Hunt situations correctly. Look, when it comes to Christian Wilkins, and you were talking about stopping the run, there's that other collection of D tackles, Tier Tart and Neville Gallimore. You know the other name. Y'all got your Canadian.
Benito Jones, Tier Tart.
Yeah, Benito Jones, right. So let's see what happens there, because especially early in the season, I think with this defensive front, this defensive line, Poop, you can almost divide it into early in the season when you suspect that neither Phillips nor Chubb is going to be there, and then later on when you suspect Phillips and Chubb will be there. How much can you do when they're not there, and how much better can you be when they get back? It's kind of a balancing act there, because these guys have to do so much before Chubb and Phillips get back that you hope they can hold it down and keep the Dolphins on track to get a home playoff game. And by the way, to me, that's a lot of what this regular season is about, right? Or can you play well enough to get a home playoff game? So can that defensive front stop the run effectively enough? Can they put pressure on the passer effectively enough until Chubb and Phillips get back? That's going to be a huge, huge question and a huge test early in the season.
Yeah, and what they've done, they certainly have acquired a lot of depth in that front seven. There's a lot of depth there. And you have two guys who have been to the Pro Bowl, Calais Campbell, Bradley Chubb. Of course, this is where somebody might come back and say, well, Calais Campbell is going to be 30 in September and Bradley Chubb's coming off an ACL. But the fact remains they're both. Jalen Phillips has been a borderline Pro Bowl type of guy. He's coming on off an Achilles. But you got a lot of good, serviceable players in that front seven. And one last thing I will say about Christian and why, to me, it was like, okay, he's gone. Would prefer having him back, sure. But if I look at defensive tackles and the really, to me, game-changing defensive tackles, there are a few in the NFL. Aaron Donald's no longer there, but he was one. That's the kind of guy I'm talking about. Chris Jones. I think Jeffrey Simmons from the Tennessee Titans is that kind of guy. Quinnen Williams from the Jets is that kind of guy. Maybe Dexter Lawrence from the New York Giants is that kind of guy. I don't know that Christian went up to that level. If he was at that level, to me, it would be like, how the hell can you let him go? But not necessarily at that level. And it's not like none of those other guys that often signed Tart, Jones, Harris, Gallimore. Of course, I'm going to forget one. It's your turn to bail me out. Are going to perform to the level of Wilkins, but is a drop off going to be really that significant that the Dolphins needed to push the envelope in terms of the salary? No. I think the Dolphins have done a really good job. Again, with the depth in their front seven, I love what they've done at linebacker because again, now your top four are Long, Brooks, Duke Riley, and Anthony Walker Jr. And to me, that's a very solid force. I mean, if one of them can emerge and be like an impact player, I think David Long Jr. has that capability. Overall, had a pretty good first season with the Dolphins. Going to be changing numbers, by the way, for those keeping track of those, going from 51 to 11. It's a weird number for the linebacker. I can't with those numbers. You got three. I mean, Bradley Chubb is number 2. Jalen Phillips 15. And Anthony Walker is, what was he, 6? I can't with those numbers. Too weird. It's too weird to me. Anyway, be that as it may, we should mention Channing Tindall because he was the Dolphins' top pick a few years ago. I'd say right now probably 50-50 even makes the team. And if he does make the team, probably looking at special teams mostly.
Yeah. Cameron Good?
Well, Cameron Good would be an edge defender. And remember, we talk about Chubb and Phillips having to come back from major injuries. This is a guy like tore his patellar tendon. By the way, on the play that turned that Buffalo game around in week 18, the punt return for a touchdown. And it's weird, too, because you see when you see the replay, the overhead replay from the back, from where the Dolphins are punting, it's Cameron Good who's got the line on. Deontay Hardy's a turner, and all of a sudden he takes a bad step and he goes down. And it's like, here's a big hole created. And yes, that's obviously horrible luck for Good and for the Dolphins at the time. So I think overall, the injury issues are less than ideal with Chubb and Phillips. Obviously, you'd like both of them to be ready for the start of training camp and good to go. There is uncertainty with Chop Robinson and Shaquille Barrett. But let's say if you play the law of averages and out of those 4 guys, 2 of the 4 scenarios are going to pan out in a best case way, I think that will be enough where the Dolphins front 7 should be very solid and allow the team to be good on defense in 2024.
Right. I agree with you there. And look, again, to me, it's not about making up for the individual talent, especially early in the season. The losses of Wilkins and Phillips and Chubb, we suspect, are significant. But you don't have to replace them man for man. You have a system, and you have Anthony Weaver on the back end, right? You've got guys such as Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer. You've got the hammer in Jalen Ramsey. So there are things that the back end can do to help the front end. They can't make up for a lack of talent in the front end, but they can help. They can help overall, right? They can help the defense become more effective. While these front 7, while some of and especially on the defensive line, while some of these guys catch up, I'm not really worried about the linebackers. You know, like as you said with Walker and Brooks. Well, I should say Brooks first. Brooks, Long, and Duke Riley and Walker. They should be good there. But that defensive line, you need the whole village, right? It takes a village. So that's what I think is going to be the key to making up for the Wilkins, Phillips, Chubb absences early in the season.
Fair enough. I think in summation, I would say the front 7 is a good, deep, solid group. I don't know that it's got elite level talent, but I think it should be good enough.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, so since we agree, we're going to wrap it up with that. Hope you enjoyed this segment, this episode. If you did, please like. Even if you didn't like it, like anyway. Like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And again, the next time we're going to be talking about the skill position players, where the Dolphins, if they're not right at the top, they're in the conversation. Yeah. So thanks again, Mr. Perkins. And everyone, thanks for watching. Until then, until next time, have a good one.